Welcome everyone to the Uzbek number one Nodirbek Abdusattorov taking on the current India number one Praggnanandhaa. Well, this is going to be a big clash here because Prag started off the tournament brilliantly with a win over Gukesh and then a draw against Fabiano Caruana, and now faces Nodirbek, who started with two losses in this tournament. Not something normal for Nodirbek. He lost to Aronian in round 1 and Gukesh in round 2. But this is the first game that Prag will have black pieces because he had white in both his first couple of rounds. And will Nodirbek be able to score something today, or will he slump to his third loss is the question. And there you have Prag coming in with his bottle of water and his jacket with Adani sports line on one side. On the other side, he has this IMC Team Liquid logo. It's great to see the number of supporters and sponsors in Prag's career growing. Well, he is also getting close to the 2800 mark. Prag's live rating is 2784. He's the current world number 3, and he'll be looking to fight it out here against Nodirbek. The game is ready, the players are ready, handshake and off we go. Let's see what Nodirbek begins with in this one. He goes pawn to c4, the English opening, and which also shows that Nodirbek is in for a fight, not going for some very solid 1e4 lines. e6 by Praggnanandhaa, keeping a lot of options open. You can play d5, you can get your bishop out, you can play f5 even. Knight comes out to c3. Now d5 is the most logical move here. And Prag sort of taking his time and goes bishop b4, a move that's not super common here. And his idea is, well, Nodirbek maybe not in the best form, let me try and put him under pressure. e4 played by Nodirbek, and Prag goes d6, just trying to control the dark squares, maybe with c5, maybe with e5. These are all possible moves. He goes pawn to d4, capturing the complete center here as white. Prag has to decide what he's going to play with. He pushes his pawn to c5, and I must say this is very interesting, the opening that he has chosen and everything here, without developing his knight from g8. And Nodirbek goes knight e2, and have a look at the timings on the clock. Nodirbek at 1 hour 21 minutes, while Praggnanandhaa is at 1 hour 30 minutes. But this next thing was huge. Prag thought, and here trying to decide between taking the pawn, getting the knight out. He finally, after close to 23 minutes, took the pawn on d4. And that's a very responsible decision, because suddenly you are transposing the game in Sicilian territory, and when that happens, you have to basically decide whether this structure that you have now after knight takes d4 is something that you want to play, because generally this is known as the Scandinavian structure, with the pawns on e6, d6, and white having the pawns here on e4, c4, called the Marozzi bind. And with your bishop on b4, would you prefer it to be on e7 here? All these questions is what Prag had to think about. He thought about it and he says, I'm happy with this position, I'm going for it. And Nodirbek now has to deal with this attack on the knight in the center. You can go bishop e2 and short castles, but he decides to pick up the knight on c6. Knight takes knight, and now Praggnanandhaa can take back with the knight here. B takes c6 seems like a good move. And just to keep this in mind, that black at any point can take on c3 and double white's pawns. But remember guys, it's not the only thing in chess. This bishop could get activated then, and the dark squared bishop would be very strong. So Nodirbek, not at all afraid of bishop takes knight, brings his bishop out to d3. And Prag is not at all interested in giving up his bishop. He goes knight to f6. Can Nodirbek actually go and pin the knight? Perhaps not so important. He castles. And I believe Pragg will also castle here. It seems like the most natural thing to do here. And he does it. Short castles on the board. Pragg has 58 minutes on the clock. Nodirbek has 1 hour 18 minutes. And now Nodirbek brings his queen to c2, defending the pawn on e4, also getting ready for any bishop c3 ideas, taking back with the queen now. There's a very interesting concept in these positions, which is to push your pawn to e5. However, knight a4 would kind of stop the bishop going back to c5. He plays e5, although I think that bishop c5 would have been more accurate, as now if you attack here, I can go to d4 with my bishop. But with e5, now Nodirbek can go knight a4, and suddenly the bishop has no possibility of going back to c5, and he plays it. So it's a good move by Nodirbek Abdusattorov, knight a4. He can play now a3, b4, expand on the queen side, bring the bishop to g5, the rook's in the center of the board. And Praggnanandhaa goes bishop to a5. Not so sure what he's planning to do. c5 could be possible some point, but then there is d5, so not yet so great. Rook b1 played. He's preparing for the b4 pawn push in this one. And Pragg goes rook to b8, stopping it. He stops the pawn from coming forward to b4. Nodirbek settles down and plays pawn to a3. He brings his pawn up. He is planning to go b4 next. Pawn to c5. Stopping this idea of b4. But guys, remember, now the d5 square has been weakened. Rook d1. I love how Nodirbek's playing here. Well, the only thing is, can he find the confidence in himself to keep pressing now that he has a good position? Oh, can we go bishop g5? Then I can pick out the knight which controls the d5 square. He brings the knight back. He's angling for knight to d5 ideas. And maybe this bishop. Pragg takes it. He takes on c3. And I don't know if this decision is a good one, because after queen takes c3, white now has the bishop pair, also has space, can go b4. Pragg plays his bishop to e6. Pragg is like, in some great scenarios, if I can get my knight to d4, that would be epic. But it's not happening anytime soon. And Nodirbek calmly pushes his pawn to f3. Also, next idea is definitely going for b4. White has double bishops, good pawn structure, but Pragg is always ready to defend now. So if b4, maybe there are problems along the c file, although it's a very playable move. He goes bishop e3, calmly trying to develop here. Nodirbek is not in any hurry. He asks Pragg to reveal his cards here. And Pragg is not someone to reveal his cards easily. He goes queen to c7. Another idea is bishop c2. He goes rook d2. He's doubling down the d file. Maybe then bishop c2 to put pressure on, or bishop e2 to put pressure on d6. h6 played. These are the kinds of positions that Pragg excels in, where he is slowly and steadily trying to put pressure. Goes bishop c2. Maybe to pop the bishop out to a4, make it more active, because on this diagonal it's not doing much. Queen goes to c6, stopping it. But now there is rook b d1, right? Just bring the rook, put pressure here. He brings it. And now knight e8 is possible, which is a bit passive. f4 could come in then. So Pragg goes rook to d8, trying to defend the pawn on d6. Oof, the pressure is a lot. The pressure is immense, actually. And you know, there are these dangerous plans with g4, h4, g5. b3 played here by Nodirbek. He's like, I'll first solidify my queen side, then slowly I have pressure here. Rook to d7. Pragg also low on time, 23 minutes. Nodirbek has 38 minutes. He goes h4. he begins his kingside play. Just imagine this scenario: if you get king f2, g4, rook g1 and kind of attack. But Pragg is like rook d8. Okay, Nodirbek, go for it if you want to attack. And well, time to go g4 now. I think that would be the perfect way to play in this position. But he goes b4. Why? Why would he play b4 when actually the real play was on the king side and he had things under control? But suddenly he changes tact. What if I take here and then attack the pawn on c4? Does that make any sense here? Of course it does. Pragg takes it. And I think Nodirbek is thinking about, he takes with the queen. But queen takes c4 now. What's happening? Yes, he simply chops it off. The pawn is taken. Queen takes c4. Queen takes on c4. Bishop takes c4. Bishop a4 is what he wants. That's the point. He goes here. And Nodirbek feels like now rook takes d6 is weak and also the a7 is weak. So this entire idea comes from the calculation of this line. Rook b7 played by Pragg. And he chops off the pawn. Rook takes d6. But to tell you the truth, this position has much less chances for Nodirbek than that position where he didn't play b4. g4 was really strong. But okay, now this could be a dangerous threat. Rook a6. I love how Praggnanandhaa is always ready with his counterplay. He's going knight f4 and bringing the rook into the game. That's his plan. He plays rook to c6 first. Oh, kind of reminding myself that a6 square was off bounds because the bishop was controlling it. And Pragg is calculating, I believe he's calculating this rook a6 move if he moves the bishop away. Yes, bishop e6. So now if rook a6, you have rook b2. If rook takes a7, you have rook e2 followed by knight g3 or knight f4. And that's counterplay. So Nodirbek goes after the e5 pawn. And maybe he wants to force f6, which could be something that helps the bishop come in. He goes check. And king f2 or h2. Rook comes back to c1. Well, Nodirbek is hoping that the rooks are traded and he can go for the double bishop endgame. But Pragg denies the trade. Goes back rook b7. And Nodirbek plays bishop d1. Slightly passive, I must say. What is the bishop doing there? He wants to maybe reroute it to e2, but rook b2 played. Getting active on the second rank. Nodirbek brings his king to h2. He has 13 minutes on the clock. Pragg has 4 minutes on the clock. So Pragg has to be slightly careful. Knight f4 played. Attacking the pawn on g2. Okay, basically taking on f4 does make sense now. Looks super dangerous. But Nodirbek goes rook c2, offering a trade of rooks. And again, taking the rooks, not a great idea. So rook b1, because black's most active piece is the rook. Rook comes to d2 now. And Pragg goes a6, finally saving the pawn on a7. Pawn to g3, attacking the knight. The knight has to move away. He goes bishop b3. And he takes on f4. This is a very interesting line now, because if bishop takes bishop, there would have been rook takes b3 attacking the bishop. But here, g takes f4, bishop d1, king comes up to g3. And there's e takes f4 check. We have king takes f4 played. And bishop comes back to b3, just improving the position of his bishop here. It's opposite colored bishops. And Nodirbek goes BD4. If rook H1, maybe just king G3, dropping back. No rook A1 is possible because the bishop controls the square. And he goes rook to D1, takes, bishop takes, and Nodirbek is going to be off the mark in this tournament by scoring half a point. Bishop C3, bishop E2, and they're repeating this position reached for the bishop C3, bishop E2, and now Nodirbek wants to make a claim. He stops the clock, I think calls the arbiter and says, I'm going to play BD4, which is a threefold repetition there. Pragg has a smile on his face, and I think what he said was that I have to make the move or something. Maybe it's not a threefold repetition, and it's not, which means that Pragg could get an extra minute. Oh, yeah, because of the wrong claim that Nodirbek made, which is not a threefold repetition here. And he gets 2 extra minutes actually, not just 1. He plays bishop D4, and now Praggnanandhaa is like, I'm going to play BD1 and offer a draw. And the arbiter pauses the clock and says, this is a draw now. Both players smile and a draw has been agreed. Well, I must say this will be a small missed opportunity for Nodirbek. He was putting pressure on Praggnanandhaa. This B4 move really released everything very quickly. But with this, Pragg actually moves on to 2 points out of 3, while Nodirbek is on half a point out of 3. The tournament keeps getting more and more exciting at the Sinquefield Cup 2025 in St. Louis, USA.